One of the most baffling cases in the late Victorian period was the theft of Thomas Gainsborough's 1775 portrait of Georgina, Duchess of Devonshire. The painting was stolen in an audacious raid one foggy morning in the mid-1870s and remained missing for more than a quarter of a century. The portrait depicted Georgina Spencer, who'd married William Cavendish, the 5th Duke of Devonshire, on her 17th birthday, on 7th June 1774. An American, Adam Worth, was in London in 1876 and was head of a forgery syndicate. One of his colleagues was arrested in Paris and extradited to England to stand trial for forgery, but that put him in jeopardy. The only way out was to free the man in prison somehow, so he formulated a plan. As he walked down Bond Street with his friend, Jack Phillips, he saw a crowd and wondered what they were looking at. It was a Thomas Gainsborough portrait of the Duchess of Devonshire, which had just been sold to Agnew's at Christie's auction house for £10,500 just a few days beforehand. The portrait had been purchased on 8th May at a sale of works that the late Mr. Wynne Ellis had collected over the years, and it sat on display in a room on its own. The pair hatched a plan, and the next day it was executed. It was foggy in the early hours of that morning, so with the help of Joe Riley, another associate of Worth's, they managed to steal the painting, rolling it up and escaping into the fog. The following day, 27th May, London was abuzz with the news of the stolen painting. The frame and the stretcher which the canvas had been stretched on was discovered around 7:30 that morning, but the painting itself was gone. There were no signs of a break-in, so it was surmised the men had been in the shop the previous evening, hiding there overnight. The window in the room, however, was open, and it was soon ascertained this was how they'd escaped. The picture had been cut away with a sharp knife, and although the point of a knife was discovered, it was deemed not to have been the one used in the theft. The cord drawn across the room to prevent people getting too close to the painting was cut into 2 pieces, and possibly used when the painting was being rolled up into something else. It was obvious from the start that this was the only painting they wanted, as nothing else was touched or stolen. The man in charge of the shop insisted he'd locked up the night before, and he was the one to discover it missing the following morning. He immediately informed his employers, and the police were called. The only clue was the half-inch length of the pointed end of the knife that had broken off during the robbery, but it was a table knife and wouldn't have cut the painting. Immediately following the discovery of the theft, telegrams were dispatched to the ports, and a reward of £1,000 was offered. The police also issued a description of the men involved, as they'd been seen. The painting was described as a celebrated portrait by Gainsborough of the beautiful and witty Georgina, Duchess of Devonshire, and measured 59 inches by 56 inches. It had been owned by Ellis for 30 years and had attracted between 200 and 300 visitors a day to view it. Soon, Riley and Phillips began to question the theft. After all, they could hardly return the painting for the reward, as their description had been circulated. But Worth was thrilled. He told the men he knew of someone, an unscrupulous solicitor, who would give them help. He planned to give this solicitor a small piece of the Gainsborough for him to take to their colleague, who was holed up in Newgate Prison. He, in turn, would profess to know where the painting was, in return for Agnew's setting up a bail bond, which meant the man would be released under those conditions, and then flee, therefore not implicating any member of the gang in the £4,000 fraud that had already taken place in France. However, this plan went awry, for a technical error in the extradition papers meant he was released anyway, and he fled the country as soon as he could. The Gainsborough was now a burden. No one could claim the reward, and Worth's accomplices started to blackmail him. Eventually, though, Worth gained the upper hand, and following his thrashing of Phillips at the Criterion Bar, who had waited the previous day with 2 police officers to catch Worth with the painting, the group parted company, with Worth keeping the portrait. Many years later, Worth wrote to William Pinkerton, and the two spoke over the telephone. Worth admitted to him all his crimes, and recalled the time when he stole the painting, but asked that no details be published until after his death. A deal was struck in that the painting would be returned, and William Pinkerton got in touch with his brother Robert in New York, who in turn contacted Donald Swanson at the Criminal Investigations Department in New Scotland Yard. Swanson sent a telegram to Pinkertons, instructing them to negotiate the safe return of the artwork, and told them that Worth's terms were acceptable. Worth left America and returned to England on a steamer. Pinkertons received the news and cabled Swanson in London. He in turn cabled back, saying that Charles Agnew and his wife had left for America on board the Etruria, and Agnew finally arrived in Chicago on 27th March 1901. In a hotel room the following day, a package arrived, and when opened, a perfectly preserved portrait of the Duchess of Devonshire unfolded. It had been missing for 26 years. Agnew confirmed it was the painting that had been stolen from his father's gallery. Nothing was reported about the painting until the Etruria docked back in England, but Swanson and his team had managed to close one of the most enduring mysteries that had spanned the Atlantic for over a quarter of a century.